My name is Maria Clayton, and I am a senior manager at M&P. I am delighted to have the opportunity to address you for a few moments prior to today's webinar. M&P is a leading national accounting, tax, and business consulting firm. We proudly serve the responsive needs of our clients in the public, private, and non-for-profit sectors, and we are committed to helping our clients, teammates, and community adapt to evolving landscape. We are proud to support organizations like the Chamber of Commerce and a partnership that aligns with business spirit and amplifies our values of leadership, excellence, commitment to enhancing our communities of where we work and live. Thank you for taking part in this session, and I look forward to connecting with you at a future Chamber event.
I'm Deborah Burke. I'm the head of client success at H2R Business Solutions, and we are honored to be able to provide this presentation for the Cambridge Chamber Business Growth Series. We're very excited to speak to you about human resources management, and I hope that you're going to be able to hear some great information. First, I'd like to tell you just a little bit about H2R. We're a full-service fractional HR consulting firm. Our consultants have a deep generalist and specialist expertise to support a wide range of clients and industries. And our services range from compliance, training, compensation, business strategy, executive leadership coaching, employer branding, employee engagement, et cetera, et cetera. We work with clients on a fractional basis of hourly, weekly, or monthly, and we're flexible to ensure that we meet our clients with the level of service support that they need and have within their budget. Our consultants become trusted advisors for our clients and their teams, and we're proud to say that we have 90% of our business that comes through referrals. H2R was started in 2016 by our founder and CEO, Jill Zapatelli, and has grown to over 30 people on our team, plus Jill's 2 adorable pups. We have a fantastic group of really committed people who do some wonderful work with our clients across Southwestern Ontario. We're here today to talk about a really important topic for most businesses, human resources management, better known as HR. HR has some very big fans who recognize the importance and scope of work that HR impacts on their organization. But there are some maybe who haven't had such great experiences with HR, and that's unfortunate. We're hopefully here to change those experiences by helping you understand what HR is and can and should be. So first, what is HR today and for the future? This is some of the things that commonly some people might think about HR. We often hear sometimes the party planners or the fun police, the psychologists, the de facto legal department, the peacemakers or conflict resolution people, the career planners or the career killers. While some of these are occasionally true, well, hopefully not the career killer, HR is so much more than that. HR is and should be things about employee engagement, leadership development, career development, business strategy, communication, change management, compensation, culture, profitability and bottom line for a company, trust, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There is just a huge scope of what HR is and should be within your organization. I like to put all of the different things of HR under the 4 Ps: passion, people, performance, and profits. I think you'll find that that encompasses most of what HR does. When it comes to discussing what HR is, my favorite part of it is really talking about people's strategies and how that aligns with business objectives. A lot of times people think people work in HR because they like to work with people. And sometimes, I mean, that's certainly a big part of what HR does. But let's be honest, sometimes it's not always easy or fun working with people. But it's an honor. And it's such a key, important part because it's the people strategies that should and do drive the key business outcomes for any organization. And so what we want is to talk a little bit about how HR does that, in what capacity and why. For any people who say that HR is a cost center, They have not experienced or understand what HR can and does do within an organization. HR is there to optimize all the people performance, which will then deliver extraordinary results for the people in the company and for the profitability of an organization. So let's talk a little bit about why HR is needed. We're going to just do a few slides here on just some of the things that HR is incredibly important and related to, and how that impacts a business. So first, people need to be hired correctly. Most owners or leaders in a company understand this. Bad hires are costly. They cost time, they cost money, they cost team morale a lot of times. It can affect the brand of a company with poor results and poor reviews that might be made by that bad hire or by customers who have had to work with them. Most people understand bad hires are something that you want to avoid. By the same token, when you're making a good hire, you want to be able to onboard meaningfully. And that's hard to do if you don't have someone who is dedicated and knowledgeable in the HR area. This is such a make or break period of time when you make a hire. Those first early weeks can determine whether that new hire feels like they may have made a mistake in their decision or they've made a good decision by coming on board. A lot of times, new hires will continue to have other companies reach out on resumes they put out during that process before you hired them. And if it's not going well through the onboarding stage and integration into the company, sometimes people will take advantage of interviews or potential offers that are being made to them. A lot of companies will lose a good hire in those early weeks. So, onboarding is just such a critical part of the process of making sure that you keep your good hires and haven't wasted all the time and resources you spent on bringing them on board to begin with. People need to be embraced with inclusivity. Many companies and leaders have really begun to realize and understand that their workforce, from individual growth, understanding modern day legislation that requires a lot of this, but just the benefits and the necessity. Sorry, hit that by accident. The benefits and the necessity of having an inclusive workforce and what that means to people on a day-to-day basis is absolutely key to a good workplace. Along the same lines, people need to be celebrated for diversity. More workplaces are diverse more than ever before, more than 10 years ago, maybe even I'd say more than 5 years ago. I think we've come a long way. The strengths, the benefits of having a diverse workplace, and diversity, I mean the full spectrum of potential diversity, offers so many things. Also offers a company the opportunity to be a better corporate and community citizen as well. And all of that stuff has an impact on your entire team. This is a really key area nowadays. A lot more understanding around the providing physical and psychological safety for people in your team. A lot of people understand that that is something that we talk about, but how it impacts companies is, I think, bigger than most people recognize. You'll see that there is a link on here to a survey that was done by CAMH, the Center for Addiction and Mental Health. Click on that link or copy that link and go there if you are interested in a little bit more on what their survey said a couple of years ago. But it's absolutely a staggering number of people who say that they are impacted to such a degree in their mental health that they are unable to work. 500,000 Canadians per week are unable to work due to mental health issues. So let me say the number again, because 500,000, I think it's a staggering number. But the science, the data seems to be very strong on this. A lot of companies have used the stats from CAMH because it is such an impactful number. That has a huge effect on people's lives, but obviously on the organizations that they work for. And in that survey, 50% of the respondents indicated that work affected their mental health, and 35% of those were experiencing burnout. Those are big things for companies to deal with and something that we can't take lightly or ignore, some things that need to be addressed. And often these are the kinds of things where you need to address it with someone who is in HR, someone who's going to understand how to create an environment where there's a safe space for people psychologically as well as physically. Along the same lines, people need to be accommodated when life happens. The safe space that we just mentioned also leads into the area of accommodation, which has become a terminology that a lot more people understand, or they may be familiar with it. It's still misunderstood in many ways at the company level and at the employee level. Um, but companies especially have legislation that requires them to understand and make accommodation with a bunch of guidelines and rules. And again, having HR along the way to help be this guide in the terms of accommodation, what's required, what does it mean, helping the employee also through that is such an important thing. But life happens. Anyone who has any employees is going to find that life happens and things, if you want someone to work for you for a year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, life is going to happen. There's going to be loss, death. There might be illness, accidents. There could be mental health issues, as we just discussed. Pandemics have come recently and been something we've all had to deal with. Financial crises, wars. What is the core issue that I think is required when you're dealing with any kind of an accommodation issue, aside from, what's legislated and required and appropriate, is compassion. I think that more than ever, if we can put compassion alongside of our employees when there's an accommodation situation that comes up, that is going to serve the employee and the organization in the best way. And HR is someone who can help uh, be that person to bring compassion into the scenario for you. Employees need to be communicated with respectfully. This is one of the most common areas of feedback that we see when we do employee surveys for our clients. Companies must get better at doing communication. For some companies, it means do communication. Some companies just don't seem to communicate with their employees, and employees express that often. And communicate with people in a timely manner. Sometimes people might, communicate things at the end of a year, whereas the team feel like they could have been communicated with in a much more timely basis. If you want things in your organization, to gain respect, dedication from your team, look for innovation, things like that, you need to communicate. And many companies feel like at a leadership level, they just don't have time. They're busy. They've got big mandates. They've got things on the go. They feel like it's hard to prioritize time to communicate with employees on things. And often they don't always know what to say, what's appropriate, what's timely, what's might fall under a legal issue or things like that. So sometimes they don't talk because they're not sure what they should say or if they're allowed to say it. But HR is definitely part of the company that should be involved in this. They can be that person who helps the communication, who helps make it happen, who makes it appropriate and things like that. So that's something that, again, HR can play a really important and key role. Along the same lines and through the feedback that we get is people want to be listened to with purpose and a process. That what that means is that people feel that they're not listened to in terms of their feedback. So they don't feel like organizations or their leadership hear them about complaints. They don't listen to them about process or procedures, ideas they may have for improvements, for innovation. They definitely don't feel like they are listened to about their poor managers and even conflicts, unless they're rising to the level of a workplace investigation, many employees don't feel like their conflicts are taken seriously or listened to. You need to have a process in place because these are things that are hard to happen just sort of on a casual basis. And you want people to understand that they have been listened to. So having a process in place where HR can develop that and help guide that and make sure that those things happen is so important, and it could be the difference between losing people and not losing people. Just as a PS, many people have heard this already through recent years, but people leave companies often because of their managers, because their managers are someone they can no longer work with. It's a poor manager. Managers are often not trained with people skills. They don't, they lack that kind of development. We'll talk about the training in just a minute, but it's such a key area, and this is where you can lose people because they don't have trained managers who have people skills, who have people training. They have people who are good at a service or, a product or something like that, but they have not been trained to manage people. They just worked in the field for 10 years and then got promoted, and that's just really a missing area for companies to deal with. We'll talk about that one in a minute. People need to be prioritized to ensure innovation and success for the organization. And this slide looks a little different because it's such a key thing. I wanted to make it a little different to stand out. Um, People need to be um, developed. They need to be um, kind of, encouraged, brought along, given the tools, resources, and training to develop and get better. They need the space to be able to innovate and bring more success to themselves in their role, but to the company and organization overall. And their success is your success. Companies should not be worried about investing in people. I've heard sometimes companies say, well, what if I invest in them and they leave? Well, what if they stay and you haven't invested in them? There is just a lot of good reasons to invest in people and to help them become more successful. And then hopefully they do stay with the dedication to your company and bring that success to your results. We talked about the training with managers a few minutes ago. First of all, it's just important that all of your people are trained and supported for their role and growth. So, whatever that is, help people develop, help them grow in their role, become the best that they can be, rise to the next level if that's a possibility. Help people to do that. But absolutely focus on training for managers. Managers lack people skills so often, and it's just not necessarily through their own, you know, reasons for it. It's a lack of training. People are really good at certain things. You might be a good accountant, you might be a senior craftsman, you might be an amazing engineer, but that doesn't necessarily mean you have people skills and people training. And that's a missing part that can add so much value to an organization. Have HR involved. Oftentimes, HR people can be actually very useful in people training and people coaching, but they can also source out the appropriate training that you might need for your managers in your industry to get the training they need to be extremely, really valued people managers. The impact to your whole team is going to be huge. Another thing that people really need to be is compensated fairly and even generously. The number one topic of the past year and a bit, sort of late 22 all through 2023, has been on the HR conferences, surveys, feedback forums, different things like that. Top three for the past year has been compensation. And that is something that, I mean, it's almost not a surprise really, but it's due to a few factors. So one is some of the financial challenges that have been sort of on a global basis, high inflation, extremely high housing costs, different things like that, where sometimes salaries and compensation haven't been able to keep up with what those look like. So some people are really struggling. So compensation has been a big issue for them. There's also a lot more transparency around compensation nowadays. There are people who talk about it. A lot of companies will post what the compensation is. There's a lot of pay equity requirements and legislation that's out there now. People understand this. They know it. They talk about it. It's not like years gone by where, it was very inappropriate to talk about your salary with other people, maybe in hushed tones, but that's not the way it is nowadays. So if you want to be competitive, you want to keep the good people that you've got, you need to understand where you stand within your market on compensation. Are you at the bottom level? Are you at the 50%? Are you at the 75th percentile or higher? You want to be in the strongest position you can afford to be in terms of compensation to keep the people that you've got. Along the same line, and I've got a bit of a different slide here as well, is rewards and performance, for performance, sorry. I showed here that it's not just about a gold star mentality. Some people will say, I hire people, I pay them, they're supposed to do a job, why do I need to reward them extra? Why do I need to go to my way and praise or, do all those kinds of things that I hear people want? I hired them for a job and they do it, and that's great. They get a paycheck for it. But people need more than that. People want to understand that they're doing a good job, they have achievements, they're succeeding or thriving at a role that they've been hired for. Maybe they're utilizing training that you've given them. They want to have that cycle of feedback. They want to understand they're making a difference in their organization or with their customers or with their team. And that's something that if you can get into a culture of giving that kind of reward, oftentimes non-monetary as well, although monetary is always great, you're going to find that that is something that just comes back to you. If you take the time to do thank yous and to reward people and to acknowledge the contributions that they make and the achievements that they have, you're going to also be rewarded for it as well. And then the last one is something that don't know what happened here. The last one is that we have, so sorry about that, guided through change management with empathy and transparency. This one is an area that I think most people will understand over the past few years, not because most people chose it. There was a lot of change which happened through the pandemic, not only in people's lives, but definitely through work as well. So work globally changed almost immediately. And some of those changes have remained. Some companies have pivoted and made things a little different and adapted and gone different directions. And others may have gone back to sort of, the pre-pandemic times as much as they can. But regardless, that was a very difficult time for companies and people. And that's a different kind of change. There's also change management, which is much more strategic. It's about those, maybe some of those companies who have pivoted, maybe gone a different direction, done different things, adapted to new ways of doing business. That's strategic, but also difficult. So if you just sort of look at the collective change that people have had to go through in the last few years, for a lot of people, it's been a lot. There's a lot of anxiety for people. And it's not just work, but it's definitely work as well. But when they're trying to deal with all the different things that they are experiencing, and it's everywhere. It's the work changes, it's getting through the pandemic, it's financial challenges, it's a more heightened awareness of racial and equity injustices. It's things like wars in the world, Ukraine, Russia, Israel, Palestine. There's a lot going on for people, and for a lot of people, they feel like it's overwhelmed and it's a little too much to take. And so, even from a work perspective, it's not something some people are easily able to adapt to. You need to have a guided way to get through some of that change, whether it's unplanned or whether it's strategic. You need to have someone like a good HR person who is, sort of trained and knowledgeable in the area of change management, helping people to get through that. And one of the key things that is what I would call a superpower in this area, if you can master this, if you have HR and leadership and managers who can have this superpower, compassion, you're going to help your team get through it a lot better. You're going to have a more dedicated team. You're going to have a team that is more loyal and who succeeds getting through these changes and gets to the other side with success for themselves as well as the organization. So that's definitely an area where HR can help, and an area where I think more companies need to understand what does that look like in a ever constant changing environment. So those are some of the things, and we honestly, I could have had slides for hours on what all the different things that HR does and is involved with and what the impacts are. But those are just a few things, just sort of get your mindset on what does HR look like in terms of every day. What's the value of HR? It's all the things that we've just talked about, but there's just a few other things to sort of close up the loops of what's the value of HR? Why is that important? This slide says a lot of it for me. It's a quote from Steve Wynn, billionaire and former founder of Wynn Hotel chain. Human resources isn't a thing we do, it's the thing that runs our business. That just really says it all to me there. It's the thing that runs our business. Without HR, how well, how successful, how much growth can your business hope to attain? If you have to get one area right in your business, make it HR because it's going to impact every other area of your business. Have a workplace environment where you know and believe your people can thrive. Whatever it is, whatever widget you're selling, whatever service you may provide, you don't have to be a nonprofit, you don't have to work in healthcare or things like that. Whatever it is that you do, have a place where people feel like they contribute, they put something into the world every day, that every day they come and they do something that has some value and they can thrive. This one for me is just huge. HR is your competitive advantage in every area of the business. I really, really believe this. As I said, if you're going to focus anywhere, focus on HR, and a lot of the other areas are going to all fall into place with meeting your business outcomes and objectives. This is where the heart of it starts. This is your competitive advantage in your market space. A lot of talk in recent years has been about a term used, the future of work. I think the future of work is now, actually, although still lots of things to change in the future, no doubt. Future of work is about innovation. It's about change. I think that the companies need to understand that there needs to be that safe space for people to be able to bring all of those ideas to fruition, to bring them to a company and understand that their jobs aren't on the line. Failure maybe should be part of a culture where that's allowed in a space where innovation and change is really important. You need to be able to have that kind of a safe space as well. It's got to be communication and trust. These are all areas that HR helps. They help create that space. They help manage and guide through all of those things. Those are the things that most companies are looking for in the age of the future of work, to develop and to incubate those ideas. Those are the kinds of things where very few people would even admit that a year ago they had no idea how much AI would impact work. And when I say work, I mean businesses of every size. There are very small businesses that are using AI now in this time of year, um, in ways that are such an impact for them, that are making them so competitive, for in ways that 5 years ago probably never could have happened. And nobody really thought that AI was going to take off and be accepted, or have people be curious about it enough to start using it in such a fast timeline. I mean, things are really evolving at the speed of light in terms of AI and the impact on business across the board. And that's only going to increase more. And so having the environment where people are able and willing and have the space, the safe spaces mentally, to do that, is going to be really important. Really, it's going to affect your business outcomes in ways that are hard to quantify now. Does every organization need R? I mean, this is, I think, what a lot of organizations think about, especially as if you're smaller and growing. Again, sometimes people look at it, is this the cost center? Is this just going to be a cost to me? I hope that after all of these slides that we've talked about, you see that that is absolutely not true. the value to your bottom line is there. I think that any company who wants to succeed, no matter your size, absolutely has to have good HR on board. It's going to affect all of the profitability of the organization. But there are some factors. So there are things like, the size of your organization, what kind of organization you have or want to be, what kind of culture do you want to have and develop, what industry are you in currently? That might have an impact as well. And what kind of support do you need? So a very general recommendation, again, with all those other factors kind of, being on the side. If you are a small company with a handful to about 15 people, you should have a part-time HR person or a fractional basis consultant, which is what we do at H2R. So sorry, clicking on this by mistake. So you're going to have a lot of impact when you start to bring on that HR person on whatever basis, fractional, part-time. You're going to start to notice the impact and the benefits. As you get to maybe 30, 40 people, you might be looking now at having someone full-time or a much deeper fractional consultant basis, more hours, more time, making deeper impact on the organization. And then by the time you're, 100 plus, you're definitely looking at, a small team and then growing from there. So those are, general guidelines as to what do you need in terms of having that person. And the dedicated part of that can sometimes mean hiring someone, but a fractional consultant will be very dedicated, depending on, who you're working with. We have fantastic relationships with our clients. Our consultants are very dedicated to them. And regardless of how much time is spent there, the focus on the value and the objectives are the same. I would just say two things need to be sort of in place for the best HR outcome. So if you're bringing in HR, these are two things I want for you to really seriously sort of consider and maybe understand as you bring that HR on board. One is that sometimes people think that HR is some is a person who only has the best interests of the company at heart. So sometimes there's like a little bit of a mistrust almost from employees because they think, you're just operating on directives from top down. Anything you hear or see, you're going to go, report back, that kind of a thing. Companies need to empower their HR person to be fully there for the team, to support them, to understand what they need, to all the different things and much more than we already looked at in this slide presentation. They need to be there for all of those things to build the trust and to really have the impact on the people strategy of the organization. Equally, they need to be able to have equal empowerment and respect at the top level of the company. In some companies I've seen, HR is not respected at the top level. They're not don't have that seat at the table, is the phrase often heard, with leadership and executive. And that's a really a big loss in terms of how to empower your HR to be the best for the company. HR is there to balance both those sides. They are equally there for the company and the leadership and the best interests and the bottom line and business objectives of what the company is looking for and how to get it. And they are fully there to support the people part of the business, which is what aligns with the business strategies and outcomes as well. And HR can balance that. They just need to be able to have the ability, the respect, the empowerment to do so. And then just sort of lastly, in closing here, this is just a quote that I just find really impactful for me. It's from a few years ago from Brene Brown in her book, Dare to Lead. The world is desperate for braver leaders. It's time for all of us to step up. I think that this is a quote. I loved it years ago, and I just think there is no better time for this to be a meaningful quote nowadays we could probably say politically as well, but for leaders, for managers, for HR, for anyone who is working with teams and people. People are looking and need braver leaders to step up, to be bold, to be empowered, to be compassionate, to be people who are willing to be innovative, and to support the really important part of organizations, which is the people. The people strategies align with the business outcomes. And I just feel like this is a quote for today. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about human resources management. If you have any questions or feedback or anything you want to talk about with what you've heard today, please reach out to me. My email is on this slide here, Deborah@yourh2r.com. I'd be happy to hear from anyone who might want to reach out to me. I really appreciate your time and listening to this today, and I hope it's been beneficial with some information for you. Thank you so much.